Thank you
Thank you.
to joining our webinar. I think I have to say that this is not the best reason for have a webinar. We have a crisis, a pandemic with coronavirus, and we have to discuss behind also if we are aware of all the human tragedies that are happening in Italy or in China or United States at the moment, that we have also discussed the tragedy what we have now with our economy. And I think this is the second part of this story. What is now with our SMEs, with our businesses, what we can do, what is the impact for our companies directly in every home country, for the European internal market, for the global dimension. And I think we have to think about this, what we can do now, but also what will be the future, because perhaps it's also a chance in this crisis to do now reforms and steps forward we never did, or it takes too long before. And the topic of our webinar is today, strategies for mitigating the impact of COVID-19 on the European economy. The host today on Welcome Speech and Opening is our dear friend Domagoj Ivan Milosevic, member of the European Parliament and president of SME Global of the European International Democrat Union and vice president of SME Europe. Thank you for that you are here today with us. I know that you have to go later to the Parliament for a crisis meeting. Then as keynote, this is a great pleasure to have Kirsten Schreiber, Director for SME Policy, DG Grow, European Commission. Thank you that you are here. I have to say, we get huge support from the European Commission. In the last webinar last week, we had Commissioner Dombrovskis as guest. I have to say thank you very much that you take your time for these webinars and for this communication with our SMEs. We have as guests also interventions from association, but also from the business director as entrepreneurs. First, Ralf Kamphöner, head of Brussels office Confederation German Textile and Fashion Industry. Thank you that you're here today. I think this industry is hit in many ways by this crisis. Michael Jäger, Secretary General, Taxpayer Association of Europe. I think it's good that you are here because we are spending now also a lot of taxpayer monies, but we are also destroying businesses with our measures we have now. So where is the balance? And then Roberto Chiolo, I think I said it in the right way, Chiolo, President of EAS and Partners. Thank you from Italy, member of SME Connect. I think you are not only active in Italy, you are in Europe active for helping to invest and to build up businesses. I think you give us a very important inside view. And as conclusion, Jürgen Warborn, member of the European Parliament, Committee of the International Trade, member of Committee on Budget. I think two very important committees at the moment. And Vice President of SME Europe, and I think from Sweden, we have heard always, until now you're going the other way, but I think perhaps you can give us some points of views from Sweden, but also what it means global. I think the competition is not coming to an end, it's starting now under new circumstances. And now I want to give the floor to Domagoj Ivan Milosevic, for the welcome and opening. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Horst. Good afternoon to everybody. I hope that you and your families are safe and healthy throughout this time, and I'll try to make a short introduction for today's webinar. And thanks again, Horst and your team to really organize every week some events that are really, I think, useful for all of us. We are obviously fighting the three crises simultaneously right now. One is the health, second is digital, and the third is economic. I will not go into details, but the third one, of course, but I have to mention the digital that hasn't been so far tackled very much, I think is also important because we see all the pros and cons right now in this crisis influencing also the economy, or helping at the same time. Not really. The fake news is all over. So let me focus on the third one, which is the economic, which is yet to come, already coming in last couple of weeks for most of the companies, and most of them being SMEs exposed because of their just size and different positions in the markets. So we have seen last weeks that basically all the European member states, national governments took more or less similar precautions, similar measures to help their businesses. I try to follow rather a few of those, but I think in bases are everywhere the same, and they're focused on the hardest hit sectors of the business and the SMEs, particularly obviously those businesses which are shut down for weeks, like tourism. One thing that seems to be settled, and I tried to get on board some people from Brussels, is to settle the logistics, because I mean, if the something has to flow, this is the goods. And seems to me, and from also my very personal experience, with some delays, but there is a supply and delivery more or less with some delays going on all around in reasonable times under the circumstances. And last but not least, what we hear already, there will be EU funding for nation states, for SMEs, for many different programs, and I think this is of course expected and very well. All these measures on all the levels that I have traced so far, basically short term, are focused on keeping the people employed, even if they don't work, staying home, working or not working, but keeping the jobs and helping the companies to keep their employees. Second is obviously direction liquidity, to keep enough liquidity not only for the banks, but I think it's extremely important, particularly for the SMEs, the liquidity. And third is the quick restart, because we do hope that the next, I don't know, I have no crystal ball, but within next 45 days, faster or a bit slower, but I hope we will see a bit of restarting our economies. And I will finish with two pillars which I believe are important to think in the future. First, as Horst mentioned, the structural reforms across the union. I think we need to think right now how we can really make our economies and EU as a whole more resistant to future crises. How we can, or most of our countries, not all, most of the member states making the structural reforms, particularly goes for my country, finally done. So we need more pro-business, we need less bureaucracy, smarter regulation. I would go in normal stances, of course, going in the direction of the tax, but tax at the moment being spent heavily, the taxpayers' money going to support the economies. I don't think right now is the appropriate time to discuss that. And last but not least, I think we should all discuss where we want in next years some of the new sectors that is not only IT, but maybe we could do better in general in European Union agriculture and manufacturing. And I'm absolutely sure that this crisis will show all of our weaknesses and strengths. I hope we can all together learn from this, not only on the economic, on all of the sides, but now we talk economy and business. And I hope we can use the opportunities that are obviously around us in the near future. And I'm sure we can do it only together as we work very closely together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Domagoj, for your welcome and opening. I think you summarized it, what we want to talk about now, to discuss here. And I think, yes, it's complicated because this crisis touched so many dimensions, from structural crisis, from technological crisis, from health crisis. And I think we have also to see how to help, because, of course, sectors are in focus, tourism, but also car motives, but automotives, but also we have to discuss how to help the SMEs. SMEs are the backbones, but SMEs are not living for them all. They are value chains. So SMEs are working together. They're living in an economic environment. And I think now we have from the Commission the opportunity to have a keynote from Kirsten Schreiber. I think you will give us an input. Before we worked or I discussed for 3 weeks at Dombrovskis' office how the strategy for SMEs should look for the future. What changed now? What do you think it's now? What's coming up now? It's now the plan for the SMEs and for our economy? The floor is yours, Ms. Kirsten Schreiber.
Yes, thank you very much. And I apologize for being only on the phone, but the line is more stable and I wanted to make sure that I don't sort of disappear and you don't have sort of moving images. Yeah, thank you very much for organizing this. And of course, this is not exactly the same discussion one can have face to face. And I would also like to apologize beforehand that I will have to leave this call relatively quickly after I have spoken. But I mean, I really very much welcome this exchange. I would like to focus really on, let's say, what we are currently doing and mobilizing for SMEs, and then give a few indications on hopefully more structural future measures. I mean, as you know, my DG Grow has been really at the heart of the different initiatives now ongoing in the context of tackling the crisis. We have focused a lot on the free flow of essential protective equipment, on finding this protective equipment, and of course also on supporting specific sectors and mitigating the impacts. Looking at, I mean, SME policy in particular, I think we all know that SMEs are the most vulnerable in this crisis. They have usually lower margins and they need support in cushioning the negative consequences on labor markets and other vulnerable parts of the economies. And as you just said already yourself, they are important parts of crucial value chains, but they are often the last ones to get paid, which is actually aggravated in this particular situation. I would just like to quote some figures from Italy, which, as we all know, is one of the hardest hit countries in the current situation. And we actually see that 75% of SMEs say they are affected by the corona crisis, and of course, even more in tourism or transport sector. And at least 50% as a general figure, again, higher figures in tourism or transport, expect significant economic losses. And this really adds to challenges which were partly already experienced by SMEs in Italy beforehand, where already in normal circumstances, the majority of them experience often delays in payments. So this is really a situation which is, I mean, extremely severe, and we really have to address. And I think we have actually reacted almost instantly by having really rather exceptional support measures in place. So as most of you know, the Commission came out with a strategy to counter the economic impact of the pandemic on 13th of March, where we notably have, and I think Mr. Dombrovskis probably explains this also at the time, a very new and quite far-reaching state aid framework adopted. Then I think what is really important to point out as well is that there is an unprecedented effort to mobilize the EU budget to allow the European Investment Bank Group to provide short-term liquidity to SMEs, and really directing 37 billion euro to the fight against the virus. And more specifically, also what I'm directly responsible for myself, in order to bring immediate relief to the most hard-hit SMEs, we have 1 billion euro which are redirected from the budget as a guarantee to the European Investment Fund to incentivize banks to provide liquidity to SMEs and mid-caps. And we calculate that this will help at least 100,000 European SMEs and mid-caps to access around 8 billion of financing. And the focus here is very much on working capital loans with a maturity of 12 months or more to give SMEs a little bit of breathing space, but also credit holidays, because this is another very important issue when you have already existing debt. And to reach this 1 billion euro, we have actually our existing loan guarantees under COSME, which is a program which I run for the SME competitiveness, boosted by an additional 700 million euros which comes from EFSI, from the European Fund for Strategic Investments. And we also have a top-up for the other fund for Innofin. And actually, from that point of view, it's very good timing that we speak today. The EIF has actually published just today, a couple of hours ago, a revised call for the expression of interest for financial intermediaries interested to participate in the scheme. And SMEs will be able to apply directly to their local bank, local intermediary, which will take part in the scheme. And you will also have seen that the EIB has just discussed the creation of 25 billion guarantee fund to scale up its support for companies in all 27 member states in order to reach an additional amount of up to 200 billion. And this is actually will be discussed tomorrow in the Eurogroup. So we have, I mean, huge, I would say, huge figures of money which is mobilized, and I mean, we have tried to make sure that this money can really reach SMEs as quickly as possible. I would also like to flag that we are shortening all the time to contract and procurement and grant award processes to really make sure that there is no sort of bureaucratic or administrative impediment that the money goes out. Let me also flag that under the European Innovation Council, which you probably know, we have now fast-tracked the awarding of grants for those companies which may actually be able to provide innovative solutions in the context of the current crisis. And here again, we have a combination, I mean, some blending finance of grants and equity investments of up to 15 million for very promising companies. So I don't spend that much time on talking about the money, but I think here it's really important that we address the very short-term urgent needs, because otherwise we will have companies which will be lost and which will, I mean, create not only human and social drama, but also huge problems for the economic exit strategy, which we all want to discuss very quickly. Let me also say that with all these short-term measures, we don't lose, of course, sight of our long-term strategy. And you will recall, it was a bit ironic in a way, that we have, under one of the very last Commission meetings before the Corona crisis, we actually adopted the new SME strategy, for which we had worked very, very hard ever since the beginning of this Commission. Ironic, I'm just saying, because we then afterwards we immediately had to move into crisis mode. But I think it is still a very, very important guiding principle for us, because here we actually want to address the more longer term strategic needs, and we will have to face those even with more, I think, importance once we start discussing the exit and strategy. And here again, I mean, the issue of digitalization and the transition towards sustainability will remain very much in focus. Let me stress here that, of course, we are looking at the strategy and sort of seeing what we should deal with more quickly and which actions we should anticipate. Just as an example, let me say that the new tool, which is a sort of, I mean, Escalar, which is a new risk-reward mechanism to boost availability also of venture capital for scale-ups, is actually anticipated, because you also see big issues for startups and scale-ups in this current crisis context. And the call for Escalar will actually be published this Wednesday by the EIF. And then we have really tried to mobilize the Enterprise Europe network, which you may well be familiar with, to really reach out to companies to provide information about access to finance, in addition to its more long-term activities, which is really about ensuring that the transition towards a sustainable economy is supported by the different partners. Let me also say that we will be very attentive through the SME Envoy network, where we share best practice, but also to all other channels, that we really reduce red tape across the EU, because I think we have to be very, very careful when things pick up again, that, I mean, companies, SMEs in particular, will be even more difficult for them to cope with certain additional administrative requirements, and we have to be extra important, I think, in the context of the recovery. And finally, let me mention the issue of late payments, which I already touched upon at the beginning, which is a big issue in a number of countries, but which is certainly becoming now with the crisis an even bigger one, because SMEs, I mean, paying late, you know, your SMEs is often a way of also of getting liquidity for larger companies, in inverted commas, getting liquidity. So we really have to be attentive, because otherwise we start big vicious economic circles, which we really want to avoid. So let me conclude by saying that I think we have, I have to say, I've really seen a lot of dedication going on in the Commission, in member states, with all our stakeholders, and I think we're really working together for a common objective. And I think we have many positive stories to tell of very practical support of member states helping each other, of hospitals being built and modernized with EU funds, of patients being treated in other countries. So I think it's really important to stress all these stories, because I mean, as my previous speaker said, I mean, we have so many fake news going on. I think it's really important to stress all those stories. And we are already working together with colleagues on a proper exit strategy and to help relaunch, I mean, our real economy after the shutdown in different countries. And I mean, we do believe that what we have set up in terms of ground through the SME strategy will then get a really new meaning and hopefully be an important tool. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm really sorry, because normally and those people who know me know this, that I like to have a proper interaction, replying to questions, etc. So I really apologize that I will have to leave this webinar quickly, but I'm sure this will not be the last time we'll exchange on the issue. And thank you very much again for giving me the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you very much that you gave us this full picture, and also that you took your time for this. Do you have perhaps for one question from our other speakers time, that perhaps Jürgen Warborn, you want to say something, or Milosevic to add something now, if you have the opportunity, one question before you have to leave? Jürgen, please.
Yes, thank you very much. That would be on the red tape issue. Do you already had some idea of what we can do to reduce the administrative burden and the bureaucracy once everything picks up again? I mean, in a more concrete way.
Yes, I mean, if you look at the SME strategy, which was adopted on the 10th of March, which I mentioned, one of the big pillars in the strategy is the reduction of red tape and I mean bureaucratic requirements, and we have some quite specific ideas about how to go about it. One issue concerns the question of gold plating, which I think is still a very important issue, meaning that member states add on additional requirements when they implement legislation, and very often it's a combination of let's say EU legislation, but together with additional national legislation, which create lots of problems. The other point we want to be very attentive on is the question of having a really proper SME test done, not only on individual proposals, but also on the interaction of different proposals. Because very often for SMEs, it's not just one legislation looked in isolation which creates problems, but the combination, let's say, of one legislation from the consumer field, one legislation from another area. And this is something we want to be extremely attentive to. And we, in the light of what Vice President Šefčovič said at the beginning in his hearings, we really want to create a proper SME filter that we really make sure that legislation which is potentially problematic in terms of bureaucracy for SMEs is properly tested and analyzed. And let me just say, in the context now of the crisis and recovery, I think we will really have to look, and I'm sure the Commission in its entirety will do this, will look very carefully about also, entry into force of certain deadlines, etc., because we are not in a situation as we had it pre-COVID. And we have to make sure that SMEs will cope and will not sort of face all kinds of new requirements exactly at the same time. So I think there will be a need for, I would say, a careful assessment. And I think we have all the measures, for instance, in the context of the Green Deal would remain important, because I mean the transition towards sustainability is a very, very important issue, but we will have to look very carefully when everything enters into force. There's a calendar, and if you look at the agenda of the Commission, which is published, the next points which we'll go through, you can see, of course, that there's a certain now refocusing on the crisis and post-crisis measures, and certainly some adjustment in terms of timing. I hope that answers at least partially your question.
Perhaps one last question from Mr. Milosevic, if you have.
If I may, yes, thanks, Horst. Before I leave, I just wanted to share an idea with everybody. I have personal experience doing business in more than half of the European member states, and there are huge differences across north, south, east, west, in between the states, where you would say red tapes, which kind, stupid regulation, smart regulation, etc. Maybe we could consider to get kind of a structure or the group on the European level in Brussels that would and could assist the national governments that would want to cut these red tapes and to bring in experience and sharing the knowledge across the union. No questions.
Can I react still to that?
Yes, of course.
Yes, I would just like to highlight that, and I briefly mentioned them beforehand. We have the group of SME envoys, whose role we actually want to increase the SME strategy. And these are really people who should, let's say, be extremely well positioned in their respective member states to actually be, I would say, at the same time an advocate and a watchdog for SME policy matters. And this includes, of course, very much the reduction of red tape and bureaucracy. And they should be knowledgeable about their own country. They should share good practice from their own countries, but they should, of course, also advise us at European level. And this group has been in existence for quite some time. I would say it has already provided very important input in some areas, but its role can certainly and should be increased. With the crisis, the Commissioner has not yet come down to actually nominate the SME envoy, so we are still waiting for that nomination, which was a bit delayed because now of all the other preoccupations, but they will certainly play an important role. And let me also stress that we have also foreseen in the SME strategy some strategic European SME ambassadors who could also, some well-versed, I would say, individual entrepreneurs who could also come up with suggestions in this field. So we're very, very keen on getting this kind of input, first-hand input, I would say, both from the administrative side, because we can get very good best practice from member states, but also, of course, from the entrepreneurial side, who is experiencing very directly what bureaucracy means in different member states, and what we can do at EU level to make sure that we overcome this.
Would it be possible, one last question for Michael Jäger, he would have one short question. Is this possible still, and then we let you go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi. It's more or less a commentation to reflect on the situation in Germany. Thank you for this financial funds and this explanation. It's important for sure, and enterprises need money, but we see one problem. For instance, KfW, if you want a credit, 10% must be own capital of the banks. And 75% of loans applications were rejected by the banks, actually. This was a research done by the private and small and medium-owned corporates. So the bank do not give the credits which are offered by KfW, for instance, because they have a problem with this 10% of the own capital. So how can we solve this problem? Because if the banks do not give the money and do not act, then we cannot bring the money, the funds to the corporates. Have you thought about this?
Yes, of course. And I mean, I'm very much aware of this debate, which is very much ongoing in Germany, but also in other countries. I would say under normal circumstances, our rules make a lot of sense. we have, I mean, the provision that you have 90% indeed
Yes.
of the guarantee, which is covered by European money, but you still have sort of 10% risk for the bank. The reason is that you also want to avoid, of course, complete like moral hazard, or that anything is financed, and you want sort of the bank to have a stake in. I think we have to indeed assess, and I mean, actually, you also probably know that under the new European state aid framework, it would even be possible to actually guarantee for 100%. So I think it's something which needs to be assessed together with member states. I think in principle it makes sense, because you always want somebody to have a stake in it as well. You don't, I mean, the bank should not be just, ticking, I mean, just basically passing on without having a look. But I do agree that in certain cases it may well be that the banks, that first the procedure takes too long if it's done properly, or that the banks may be sort of too defensive, and they may actually rather go for the same ones, the same clients they already know, and they may not be ready to look at a new one. So I think this is something which probably still needs to be adjusted, because in this current very particular context, we probably have to go even further than I would say what normally makes sense.
Yeah, the figure is clear. 74% of the applications are rejected, actually. That was the result of the publication last week, and that was making us, with the Taxpayers Association, really wondering, because it's much more than a critical corporate, which should not be supported yet because it was a bankruptcy before. But if you have 74% rejection, it's a big amount.
No, I fully understand. On the other hand, the taxpayers associations are usually also the first ones, and rightly so, who will say it's actually good if everyone has a certain stake in it, because I mean, after all, this is taxpayers' money, and you want to make sure that there is some assessment. So I think it's a bit of a catch-22, but I think it will be adjusted, in particular in Germany with the KfW, because the rejection rates were high, and again, from a European level, it's possible to actually go for higher.
Okay. Thank you very much for this information.
Thank you very much. I want not to take too much time now. We extended it really much, Ms. Schreiber. Thank you very much for your time. I think this discussion would be longer if you would be here. We have also the discussion that this new word zombie SMEs who are now saved by Corona money, who would never survive in the next months. So this is the next, if we're coming to taxpayers' money, perhaps this is the quality discussion, and under the pressure of time. But we want to discuss the strategy, what you say, the SME strategy for the future, in a webinar in May, end of May, June, under the new impressions of the Corona. Perhaps you have then more time. It was really a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for the support, and I wish you all the best in your work and also for your health, Ms. Schreiber. No, thank you, and I'll be very much looking forward to that. And maybe with a bit of luck, it will even not be a webinar in May, June, or then a real meeting. Who knows? Huh? Maybe we are optimistic and we hope. But otherwise, even with the webinar, I'm very happy to join you then. And thank you very much, and good conversation still. Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope so then. Bye. Bye. We heard now what the Commission is doing for SMEs, but I think the economy is not only SMEs. The next speaker is Ralf Kampener from the German textile and fashion industry. You have small, mid-sized, and large players, and you are also a global industry. What is your perspective? What is your intervention now here? Who we can help? How we can save? How we come better out of the crisis? Ralf, it's your floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Horst, and thank you very much, SME Connect, for inviting German textiles and fashion manufacturers to this webinar. You just mentioned briefly some insights concerning our sector. We are actually 30% fashion companies, 10% home textiles, and the bulk, 60%, is technical textiles. We are talking here about 1,400 companies in Germany. Most of them are medium-sized, and they create 135,000 jobs in Germany. We are, as you mentioned, Horst, a global player, highly dependent on global value chains. we have products like shirts that have more than 100 countries contributing to it. And that means that we need an environment not only of free trade, but also, I come back to that in a second, we need a functioning EU internal market that is vital for our industry. And that is also one of the reasons why we are a member of Eurotex, our European level umbrella organization. Now, I wanted to give you a quick, very much up-to-date insight in the world of our sector related to COVID-19 and the current crisis, because we have asked more than 300 companies just in the past few days, what is the situation they are experiencing now? And we have got responses from a lot of companies that were actually having very small numbers of employees and who feel the crisis very, very strongly. And they have reported the following to us. Almost 60% told us they had issues with orders that were lost or that had to be canceled. Almost half of our companies said that there was a decrease in production in their own company. And almost half of the respondents as well suffered from supply chain disruptions. Almost 40% experienced liquidity problems, and a quarter roughly of the respondents struggled with bureaucratic requirements. Now, you have all read the newspapers and saw news on the social media. And a lot of companies in our sector have had to introduce at a very, very suddenly new product lines like protective masks and similar products that are related to Corona, and they're doing their very utmost to produce as many of them as they can. Now, the outlook is not very encouraging at present. Out of the 16% of the companies that are planning to close their businesses temporarily, half of them said, well, they will probably be closing for something like 2 weeks. A bit more than 40% will be closing for a month or so, and 6% told us that they will probably close for more than 1 month. So this is, in a nutshell, the picture in our sector. And that also explains the need for a policy response. It's a twofold policy response that we need. One is a national one, and one obviously a European one. We are a sector and an association, Textile and Mode. We are communicating massively to our members also what the European level is doing, because we depend on a strong European Union and, as I said, an internal market. So what was a very good move by the European Commission also in the past few days was that certain import duties were lifted for products, for ingredients that we need to import that relate to medical equipment. You have probably seen the announcements. This was very much welcomed, and we are also happy that this was made possible quite quickly. We also see that at national level, there are measures like financial support decided today in Berlin. That is good news for us. Now, I cannot speak for ages, therefore let me quickly run through some of the requests that we have. We need an emergency plan and direct help for the SMEs as soon as possible. We need to accelerate the payments for the short-time workers. We need to create liquidity funds. We need to reduce sales tax, and we also need to avert ruinous discount battles. And what is very important, also in the light of the discussions of the days in which we are living now, is to make sure that the borders in the internal market are left open for employees that are working in Germany. And that implies obviously also the need for as short as possible waiting times for merchandise at the borders if the internal market is supposed to function. The crisis is already hitting companies strongly enough, so we can not afford unnecessary or more restrictive than necessary measures that would limit the functioning of the internal market any further. Now, let me make another point that I hear very, very strongly from our companies. We are now at a time when people have just stopped talking on the front pages of the newspapers at least, about things like the European Green Deal, chemicals policies, or things like carbon border adjustment measures. But these are still things that are in the air. And we hear from all members that if certain requirements in the field of chemicals policy, or certain requirements that are in the pipeline by the European Chemicals Agency, ECHA, if those plannings continue as if nothing happened, as if there was no corona crisis at all, and here we are talking about requirements related to REACH and so on, then that will be felt very strongly by a number of companies in our sector. We also wonder, what about the planning, the timing for the European Green Deal? Can we afford to keep that timing as it was proposed, or do we need to adjust it? Question mark. I think there are good reasons to think about this question more closely in the coming days and weeks. And then the question, if in the current situation we can really afford a discussion on carbon border adjustment measures, or even worse, unilateral carbon border adjustment measures, as we discussed it also in the last weeks and months. We need to support SMEs very strongly, including in our sector, not only, and that's my conclusion, at national level, but also, and very, very strongly so, at European level. Again, this is something we need to do. We also need to think about an exit strategy and recovery plans, discussions that are starting in member states right now. We need to have that discussion also at European level, because, and that is my concluding sentence, as Martin Selmayr, the Commission's representative in Austria, wrote very well, it would be nonsense to have the Oktoberfest in Munich while the cafes in Vienna are still closed. So please give us the support that our SMEs need also at European level.
Thank you very much, Ralf. I think, like I expected, you gave us a complete overview, because your branch, your sector is really global, and also small businesses at the same time. It shows us also how the internal market is now hidden by all these measures. And I think the last thing what you say, what is the, if one member state is locked down and the other not, we have no market still. It is not also not a success if Germany is coming successful out of this crisis and Spain not, because then where are our customers, our clients, and so on. I think it shows how global and how European our economy is. So I think this could be also a good lesson for us. But now we're coming also to the taxpayers. We have now a lot of wishes, not of need of liquidity. And at the same time, somebody has to pay it. We cannot print only money, or we can. Michael Jäger.
It would be nice if we would be able to print money, but the European Central Bank is doing this yet. So thank you, Horst. I just want to add and contribute a little bit. If you want, you can spread later the direct link on the paper we published today, just to give best practice to start a deeper discussion. What could be done, what is nationally already done, proposal and for discussion. So we have to look on the European level, what is possible, and especially on the national level, what should be done on the national level, because it's also a national crisis. It's not, I think the countries asking now for European help should first also look inside what they can do, like Germany, what we did. And so I was really happy when Mrs. Schreiber said that what is actually done, and she didn't mention Corona bonds and Euro bonds and tax harmonization. There's a strong move now with social security system that things should be harmonized and everything should be done on the European level. And we have always to keep in mind, we have the European stability mechanism to stabilize the euro. We have the European Central Bank, we have European Investment Bank. And so also if the Maastricht criteria are violated now, so it will not be a problem. So there are enough tools already available and could be used already. So that's one point. So we do not need an increase of taxes. I think that's the wrong approach. Some politicians in Germany start now already a discussion how to finance the help, Corona help. And it would be wrong approach with an increase of a wealth tax or other direct taxes if one group has to pay and the other is benefiting. So that's really important that we take care in this discussion. And we have also to look for a plan how to pay the money back. Because look to Germany, we have now 500 billion at least, which will be spent. Bavaria has 20 billion now in an active plan, and loans and others will be 40 billion for industry. So 60 billion potential 20 indebtedness and 40 other potential indebtedness. If you look to our actual debts, what is 25 billion, it's a huge amount, a really huge amount. It's only for one crisis. We have the Corona crisis. What will we do if we have the next winter a flu or Corona 20? So we must make our economy fit for further crisis. And so we need also to support. I hear nothing about research and development. If you have nothing against the virus, no medical treatment, this will be also a big problem for us. And I already mentioned the problem with the banks. And we think there's a declaration in Germany, you have to declare that the crisis you have is related to the Corona crisis, to the coronavirus. And if you look, I can tell it here, it's not a hidden secret. If you look to Fabiano, for instance, in Germany and other big branches, they had a problem yet, and they misuse now this crisis to be under the umbrella of the Corona funds. And I think that's important afterwards to tell to people, look, there will be a control. The economy minister of Bavaria told it clearly. We cannot control every spending, but there will be a certain control if people have needed the money, if it was a correct fill-in of the declaration or not. I think it's really important to clarify that this help is for corporates in need. Otherwise, we have an object support. We think it's better to support SME or industries who are in need. If you look now to Edeka and the big stores, they have no problem yet because people buy food and say that's the only shop which is what is open. So I think that's important, and also copy best practice. If you look to Germany, we have reduction of advance payments, deferral, extension of payment deadlines. That's also important. If you have to make your tax declaration, and what also was mentioned, fast refund of taxes. It's not only if someone, a corporate, you get money from a corporate. Often in many countries, the state itself is not paying his bill. So the money must be refunded. So we need a fast refund, and also it's important, how to say, improvement of loss carryback. And all these things, improvement of amortization rules, liabilities. And we are in favor not to give too much direct payments. We think it's better interest-free loans and credits that you have so you have a higher level. Otherwise, like in Germany now, we hand out money by watering can. Everybody is getting 9,000 to 15,000 euro, and with a small corporate. And the question will be, is it helpful or not? So for that reason, we have to have a deeper look, and also cutting down red tape for sure. In Germany, law is restricting home office and also data protecting law. So we need a more open way now, and not a strict control of this. Otherwise, the corporates will suffer. And please keep in mind, we have to do everything that the own capital to strengthen SME, because we see it now in Germany after 2010, when we had the banking crisis, 28, 29, 2010, the German SMEs went through in a good way. But if you talk to most of them now, they have no own capital, no resources. So there's a big need to strengthen entrepreneurs, and that's why the Bavarian Prime Minister proposed also tax cuts. So we think it's better that the corporates spend money than we give transfer payments. So everything we can do now to strengthen SMEs is from our point of view, needed and welcome. Not only to give direct payments, a better way from our opinion is to cut down red tape, to simplify things, cut down taxes, Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your perspective. I think I come to this German quote, if I hear you, operation successful, hospital patient dead. If we don't be careful, we're saving the moment, but we're losing the future, because if you say, if we put all our reserves into this, what is left then in the end? And I think this is also a dangerous moment, but also what you say is perhaps where are the chances of this crisis to put down the burdens, and also that we have now the time for reforms. But the last thing is also how to get now money to the people, to the market, like America's, United States is doing this. Who get this money in the end when they're spending this money? Spending this, they're saving this money in this moment if they get $5,000 at once, or to who they spend this money then in the end? To Amazon? Can be. It's also going to SMEs who are selling their also goods. It's not so that perhaps it's also a chance for transmission that SMEs becoming digital now because they have to. But now we're coming to Roberto Corciolo from Italy. Corciolo. Thank you very much. Sorry very much.
No problem. No problem.
Perhaps you have this both. You knew the situation in Italy, but you are also used to be active in the common European Union, and you are helping to opening businesses in Germany or in Belgium. You have a good overview, I think. Please give us your perspective. What is needed for Italy? What is needed for Europe from your perspective?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the invitation. It was very useful to hear a lot of information, and I think we could share here the common experience at national level and what I think it's important to share on European level. On our experience, we have offices even in China, and we start in January to see the situation in China and the crisis in China. And I was a little bit disappointed that in Europe, we don't take care about this. And we go in, I could say, lowering the emergency. And this, for me, was a big mistake that I hope in the future someone will check. Because the first lesson is that we don't apply a risk management, I could say, activities in this situation, looking what's happening in China and what became in China. For this, the management of the situation in Europe was delayed. In Italy, we started from the beginning, and our government don't keep the strong measurements from the beginning. So we delay from 15, 20 days to close the country, but at the end, we close the country in a very hard way. So now we have 70% of the activities that is closed with the shutdown. Economic activities. In Italy, we have 99.5% of the companies are in the range of 0 to 50 employees, so small, medium enterprise. This means that this shutdown is affecting in a very strong way the economy, even because we are the main areas that are suffering this coronavirus emergency is in North Italy, especially Lombardia, Veneto, and Emilia. That is the three regions that provide the major part of our GDP. So this situation was, I don't say bad managed, but I think it could be done in a better way. Now, this is, on this, we have the bureaucracy, we have the block of the transport. So this affects a lot of our system because we are second largest manufacturer in Europe. We have around 200,000 companies that export, and we follow a lot of them in the export process around the world. So we know that a lot of these companies now are affected because they could not move people, they could not move goods. It's clear in the last days something is better, but I think we must reacting in much more because what we saw that 27 countries in Europe decide in 27 different ways in the first beginning. I agree, because it's clear when we have sanitary issues, it's clear each country will, I could say, get the decisions for its own people. But now we could not move forward without an European discussion. But when I said European, I don't say only European Union, because sometimes the people, and this is the communication, I think, is something where European Union has to work too much to share information, as the lady of Commission said before, because in general, this information don't flow around in correct way, or it's going only, I could say, the big messages, but not how the companies could get money, how companies could, I could say, have benefits for these rules. And in this moment, we need that politicals in Europe put their face on the table, around the table, and get decisions, because it's simple to say that is the European Union, the fault of the European Union. In this moment, I think the politicians has to make the right, I could say, decision together, if we would like to sort out all of us, because this kind of pandemic we could not manage by single countries. And we could not manage in the way we saw in the last weeks, where the discussion was about Corona bonds, yes, Corona bonds, not. About the Italy, it's a country that don't manage well its debt, and it's true. And a lot of things that we know in each country. But in this moment, we could not see the things with the same way you use in the last year or the last months. We have to see in different way, because we are structuring after 30 years in Europe. All the companies are connected, the infrastructure is connected, the financial system is connected. So we need urgently that the people speak in correct way and give correct information, because we call pandemic, but it's also an infodemy of this situation, where the information flow around in a worst way, and the people is afraid because they don't understand how we are going. Now in Italy, we don't know when the companies and the economic system will reopen. I don't mean tourism, I don't mean shops, etc. I mean factories that are closed. We need to reopen, because in this moment, if we will reopen in May, I think more than 50% will not reopen. Second thing, tomorrow we are waiting now for the new rules for the liquidity. We heard a lot of things positive, and I hope that tomorrow we will have good information from this. But it's clear, we have stopped everything. And now the liquidity is an urgent matter, especially for this small, medium enterprise, because they have no other way to keep money, no other way to find situations. And this, we hope something happen. And bureaucracy, I heard for all the people that the word is used by all of us, to establish connectivity. It's clear, under intelligent way. We could not have issues that today, for example, a truck driver coming from Hungary get 15 days of quarantine in Italy, and when he go back in Hungary, get 15 days of quarantine. So no one will drive in Italy, no one will drive in Hungary. This situation must be saved, and we have to sort out of this situation. Then we need to lower bureaucracy. Bureaucracy today is a big issue for all, especially in Italy. Italy, we live in the bureaucracy. We live in this situation. And today, what's happening? The first rule that our government popped out, we saw that they delayed the terms of payment of taxes for 4 days, but they delayed the terms of control for the tax agency of 2 years. So at the end, what is the message to the people in this case? That you must pay after 4 days in this crisis, but the government, the state could manage these issues in 2 years. It's not correct, it's wrong. So this basically what we are looking for: reopen in intelligent way, reopen the connectivity in intelligent way to have liquidity for the companies. I expect through banks, basically, because the systems today to inflow money, I don't believe to inflow money to the people. We saw the big fund that create that create the opportunity to save the workers. I agree, but basically this is one end. The other end, we have to support companies, because if we support companies, we could have in the future the expectation that the companies have employees, move forward, recover, etc., etc. But if the companies go down, bankrupt, and how we will manage the people? We will not have enough money to cover this situation. So we have to balance this situation and not see only in one part. We have to see even in the part of the small medium enterprise for sure, and the other enterprise. So we hope this it move very fast on this. Looking the general situation, it's clear we cover 17 countries. We have offices in these countries, from China to Europe, etc. And we saw that it's clear all countries are suffering in different way. Italy start in March, the other countries start after, Spain, Germany, etc., etc. in the weeks after. And we see that the situation is quite the same. The decisions are taken by the single governments in their single way, that this create a disaster in the interpretation, how to move the goods, how to move the people, if they could move. So this we need today to reopen the markets. We need to reopen the opportunity for the companies in intelligent way. I mean, because this flu will stay with us for the next 2 years. Without the vaccine, we could not go, I could say, in quiet way. We could not work quietly. So we will change for sure. But we need today to make the things in intelligent way. So we need management. We need people that manage this situation in clear way for all. We need to put the brains together, not to put different 27 countries that work in single way. This will not work in this emergency, in this pandemic situation.
Thank you very much. I think you brought very interesting perspectives on the table. First, yeah, where was the emergency plan for Europe in such a case? The pandemic was expected. We have in Germany already in 2012 a scenario for this, but there was no scenario for the European Union. And now I think it's important to develop a common scenario to come out of this, because like I said, like you also say, it's not helpful if France is doing something different, Hungary, and everybody has a different response. And this must be coordinated, in fact. And I think it's also a chance for Europe, because it should not end in Europe. Europe must be the example for the global trade, how to coordinate this. I think it shows us how strong depending we are to each other. And I think we have really to be clear who sticks then in the end to the rules and wants to cooperate and wants to be a partner, and who not. I think this will have an impact how we have new relations in global trade. But now I think it's a time for questions. So please, we prefer vocal questions. So if you would make a sign with your hand, with the digital hand here, you can ask a question and say your name and organization, or if you are a private person or company, please. The floor is yours. It's now your chance. Also, the speakers can ask questions. Huh?
Yeah, so just press the button, raise my hand, and then I will choose you. And if please state your name and your organization. And the first goes to Peter Rübig. Yes, Miss Audio ein. Okay, this doesn't work. Then Yeah, Mr. Rübig, please speak. All right, I think we have issues with your microphone. You have a very high-pitched voice.
Next question then.
I would give it.
Next question then. I think we had this problem once again already.
Sorry for this. Okay, then Mr. Jäger, please.
I want to come back to the question research and development. I think it's a chance for Europe too. Horst said it already with supply and demand chain. We are really depending on other countries, and so for serum and for these virus research, this should be a European project. It should not be only related to one corporate, because the investment is too big. So let's think about these topics. Wouldn't it be possible to establish such a cross-border and European research on these things, to spend money? Because I don't see any financing besides, I think 80 million were spent now to HOP, who's from SAP, who has a corporate who is working on a serum. But I think it should be on a European level. It could be a good challenge and an opportunity for us. Thank you.
Who would like to answer this? I think, or who you would like to address this question?
It should be to the European Commission. I think we should collect, as we did it with the taxpayers. Look to our paper. It's just a discussion paper. It's not a working paper. What should be done? It's just to collect some alternative what was already done. But I think research and development, we have to booster our research and development. It could be done on a national level if you have a tax credit for this, or by a budget on a European level. We spend money for sure for corporates to solve problems, but the question would be, shouldn't we not invest more in research and development for Europe?
So this is still now the question, in fact, how to invest, how to use this money in the best way to get also dividend,
interest.
What? Interest, exactly, and in fact. But I think we had here also written questions from the crowd. So Karina Stan asked, how could the support measures also provide incentives for SME digitalization, utilizing digital tools and digital skills training? The EU should lose not the momentum. So could it be that we have also now the time, we discuss this also, Milosevic says this, digitalization, is this now the next topic after trade and health? What is the topic of the European Union? Is this a chance that now all these SMEs they have the time now to make this investment, also the time to train themselves? Or is this like a little bit cynical to say now your business is closed, now you have the time to learn? Who would like to answer this?
Yeah, but Horst, digitalization doesn't only mean that corporates digitalize their business. Also, administration should do it. So if you like the first, you had to do a written declaration if you want to get Corona funds. Now in Bavaria, it's digital. So that's also possible to have a 24-hour mayor's home where you can do your business. I think it's also for administration to speed up the process of to minimize red tape. If you have a digital process, standardized processes, this could help business too. If you have not to ask for things and to wait for too long answer of administration, it's not only corporates.
Thank you. I want only to add something, perhaps a question for Roberto. Fidelity makes an analyzing of the last big pandemic, the Spanish flu, and other financial crises and so on. They say the industry will recover very fast. They have a very optimistic point of view, but tourism and the service sector and so on, they will suffer very long for the next perhaps 5 years, because people will spend less money. And they say also it can be a high number of bankruptcy in this sector. So what you are thinking, is this a problem of different sectors, and you can say the industry and the productions, they will coming back fast in 1 year, it's everything okay, but the rest will be in a long agony?
Yeah, it's true. I think we have to analyze each sector. I mean, I every day to my clients, because I spend hours with my clients, I said, my barber shop will recover in 2 months, working 24 hours, all what he lose. But my client with an hotel near the mountains will need next 2-3 years to recover. And he must have found a solution to repay the leasing of his hotel, because in this moment, no clients will come. And this is not only because the people have less money to spend, but for the safety. Today, we will come from, for example, we have a lot of students from Germany or from Austria, where near the border with Austria. How many people will move from North Europe to ski next winter? Because they must be very safe in the hotels and all this. A lot of things will change in this. For example, transport. All the system or our companies like Lufthansa. Alitalia is just I could say near the bankruptcy, but Lufthansa, British Airways, all these companies, how is the value of these companies today? I think in the next months we will need to put all together, to have one company in Europe or one company in the world. What I don't know. So I think each sector will have some gains or will have big losses. For example, in the transportation, in this moment, the railway system is working a lot. Even in the digital system is working a lot. A lot of is changing. And so I think now it's, as the lady of the commission said, is the moment, because it's clear we could not save all the people. This is true. We have to be clear in this with the people. We could not have enough money in Europe to save all the people. We need to make some choice, real choice for the next future of the Europe, of each country in the specific sectors, and to help these sectors to survive in any way. In this moment, we have to take this decision. So it's clear this means that we need to create a framework of in Europe to decide who is the sectors must survive. And in this case, the European Union has to support, fully support with the liquidity, money, etc. We need to know how to move forward with the other sectors. In the other case, we have to say it is better to go in bankruptcy or to close or to make a crisis management of these companies. Or another way is, even in Italy, we expect now some tax rule that enforce the company to merge, to grow the dimension, to create consolidation in some sectors. That could be a solution in this moment for a lot of companies to move forward and to stay in the market.
In this context, only a last question from a guest. Are you supporting Eurobonds in this case?
Me personally?
Yes, this is a question directly for you.
You know, I every day, I mean, I make one question in Italy, not outside Italy. I said, who now in Italy will support and subscribe the bonds of some region in Italy, especially in South Italy, where there is a big debt? Who will sign with his own home or with his own money to cover these bonds? I receive 100%, no, I will not. So I understand in somehow how this situation pop up. I think we have to manage in an intelligent way. I think the Corona bonds could be a solution, but managed in an intelligent way, not as now we are discussing. We could not work with the same, I could say, structure we know. we have to find an intelligent solution for this moment to sort out. Because in the other way, we risk to work with old instruments in a new world. Because now we are in a new world. We could not manage with the same way. But I replay in the first part of my answer.
Okay, thank you very much. And now we're coming to the conclusion. It's the time for politician or not. And I think this is the time to make decisions to our leading. And we learned often who make the decision, the voters are not always, even if it's the right one, are not always grateful. What is your conclusion? What is your perspective on this crisis, political and also economically? Jürgen, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Horst, and thank you to all the panelists. It's been a very good meeting, I have to say, with a lot of new insights. It is obvious to me that, first of all, it's twofold. We need both short-term solutions, and then we need long-term solutions to build competitiveness in Europe. It is obvious to me that we need both solutions on the national level and on the European level. And it, of course, is obvious to me that we need to find those solutions for the SMEs and at the same time make sure that we use the taxpayers' money as wisely as possible. Never let a good crisis go to waste. That is a Churchill quotation. Never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think that we should think what that means in these times. We who are friends of SMEs, we understand their impact and how they impact the European economy. We could really use these times to build a competitive Europe in the long run. I'd like to share with you some thoughts from Sweden, and I'd like to share some thoughts about how we have reacted. But first of all, I'd like to show you a picture of the, and I hope I can show you a picture here of no, I cannot do that. So I will give you a snapshot of how the economy
now
of some...
You can share your screen now.
Oh,
please.
excellent.
Sorry.
I'll just show you this. Let's see, like this. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes. As you can see, Horst, you have seen this before because I keep showing people this. I really think it is provocative in a way. And this is a picture of a crisis before the crisis of the COVID-19 occurred. Let's have a look at the Chinese figures. And you can see the little bubble for the Chinese economy symbolizes their size of the economy in 2017. And the bigger size is 10 years after that. So in 10 years, the Chinese economy grew by 4. And you can see India, still a very small economy, but they have grown during 10 years by 80%. And we can have a look at the European economy as a whole. And you can see we have a big economy, but the growth rate is really, really poor. We are growing at 16, 17%. And this is not only Asia that outperforms us. Look at the US. During the same period of time, they have grown their economies by around 70%, 72%. So we are doing something wrong in Europe. And this was before the COVID-19. So we really had a crisis for our competitiveness before. I'd like to give you a situation of the Swedish SMEs, because we did, with the help of SME Europe, a survey which ended last Friday. So this is really fresh data. We asked a lot of companies, and I think we had 464 answers, which is quite good for a survey like this. We asked them a lot of questions regarding the coronavirus. And these numbers are in line with the numbers we have heard from the Commission and from the textile and fashion industry as well. In Sweden, around 80% of all the SMEs predict a loss in sales. A quarter believe sales will drop more than half compared to last year. More than half, a 50% drop in sales. 70% have cancelled planned investments. And the last number is 50% of all the enterprises will be closed in June due to liquidity. They don't have money to pay their checks in June. So in 2 months, half of all the shops and all the manufacturers and all the services will be closed in Sweden if we believe in these numbers. They are, of course, very dramatic. So we need some short-term solutions and we need some long-term solutions. I think that these numbers that I present here is basically the same that we have all over Europe. In some cases, I would expect that is even worse in some parts of Europe. You said it before, Horst, in the beginning, that in Sweden we have businesses are still open in Sweden. We haven't totally closed down yet. So that you can still go to the restaurants, you can still go to the shops and whatever. It works not like normal, but it still works. So, and even though the numbers are as harsh as this in Sweden. There has been some criticism, of course, of how the European Union has worked in this. And one of those criticisms is that borders are closed. And I think this is, it is very problematic for the value chains as it is for the moment. And we have heard this very much when it comes to the protective equipment that now is needed in the healthcare. I'm convinced that tariffs and export restriction is not the way ahead. That is not the solution. Because I think we should keep the normal income flow going for the companies as much as possible. The more normal we can behave, the less the nation state, the member states, the governments, and the European Union needs to work, because all the governments needs to do lots of stuff anyhow. We saw, let me see. Yeah, we had the introduction of export restriction, as I mentioned, on personal protective equipment, such as gloves and masks. They are now you cannot export outside EU for a period of 6 weeks. And it seems like, well, we don't know, but maybe this will be prolonged. And that worries me a bit. It sounds like a good idea to keep equipment inside Europe, but actually we import about 90% of the products from third countries. So we need the flow going on. It is 85% of the EU production already goes to the European Union. So if we close our border, we won't have any production, because then other countries might close their borders as well. So keep the borders, keep the tariffs low, do not have restrictions, and open the trade flow among the European Union, of course, but also to third countries. I think that is crucial in this crisis. There have been a lot of discussion about the multilateral trading system, and people are questioning it already before the COVID-19. And I would absolutely stress that it is important during the crisis, but also after the crisis. There is, of course, now a lot of things that has to be done, both in short and the long term. And I'd like to focus on 3 issues more on the long term. I think all of you have covered a lot of important steps in the short term. But for the long term, I think the digitalization is one thing. The bureaucracy is one thing. and the budget, the financial framework for the European Union is a third thing that we have to keep focus on. So let me say a few words on those. I think we can use this opportunity with the digitalization. I see, as we have a meeting today, I see that a lot of companies start using, I see it in schools and universities, we start using the digital equipment and get used to it. And I hope that we can continue using the digitalization to make competitive steps for us. And of course here, the governments and the European Union has an important role in making sure that the infrastructure is there everywhere in Europe so we can use it, and that we have education there so people know how to use the digital equipments, and of course that all the SMEs has it. When it comes to red tape, then we must of course intensify the work of cutting burdensome and unnecessary regulation. This is something I hear from every SMEs in every meeting. Everyone talks about cutting red tape, and I think every panelist have had said something about it today as well. We need a clear goal from the European Union on that is ambitions when it comes to cutting red tape. We have seen the one in, one out principle that the Commission now is using. That is good, but one in, one out means status quo, and status quo is not enough. We have to cut the red tape by 30%, which is a goal that we have from SME Europe. Then we can really increase the competitiveness of SMEs and businesses all around Europe. Last, something about the MFF or the budget. I think now is the time to rethink the long-term budget. We need to make priorities, and I say priorities because I'm not sure that the member states will have more money for the European Union at this time. We have to change the budget within, and there has to be more infrastructure, I think, more broadband, more business-friendly budget, more 5G, more research and development, as Mr. Jäger talked about earlier, and more entrepreneurship and more education, so that we build a competitive budget for the long term. I'd like to end this on a more positive note, because it was a very long time, maybe never, I've heard SME issues being discussed and debated and viewed in public debate as much as it is for the last month. Of course, this is a stressful situation, and I would be happier if we talked about those issues during less stress. But still, we are talking about those very important issues. And I think if the general public get a hold of how important they are for our prosperity in the long run, I think it is to the better. So we should really use this good crisis to make sure that we stay competitive in Europe. We should save the SMEs in the short term, but we should build their and our wealth in the long term. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jürgen. I have to say, very strong message also in the end. I think the crisis shows us really a good lesson, that nothing is granted, and this is hard work, and that SMEs are the backbone of this, and that the economy is not only there. Economy is the basic of all. Without economy, we have no health system, we have no education, we have no infrastructure. It's everything depending on this, and then in the end to the taxpayers who are working and paying taxes. So I think it's a hard lesson. I have to say thank you. This with one in, one out, this 30%. I think this is a message you cannot say often enough. And I think also what Ms. Schreiber said, it is also one of smeconnect and SM Europe message. Please check the regulation, how they depending and infecting each other. how they are burdens who coming up on the same time. If you have to implement 5 regulations at the same time, well, separated seen as okay, it makes sense, but together it's a huge amount. Also, that the domino effect, what you mentioned, if we all stopping to becoming egoist in trade and so on, that we are all losers, and there's no winner in the end. I think it's very important. I say thank you to the speakers. I say thank you to the audience. I want to mention that SME Connect and SME Europe, both we will have every week 2 webinars, 2 different topics. So we will have also a focus on self-employment and entrepreneurship, because this is one important thing. We will see also in the future that many who has a small business, micro business, have also a second job, and also many who are perhaps worked in the tourism sector before need a second job as self-employment. So this will be, we will have more people in Europe perhaps with 2 or 3 jobs in this, from these sectors. We will discuss also very specific topics about best management, Green Deal, artificial intelligence. Please join our websites on smeconnect.eu. Please join the website smeeurope.eu. And please join also the websites of the MEPs and also association who work now with us together. Thank you very much. Stay safe and healthy. And I hope, like Jürgen, you said, a crisis is always also a chance. I hope we learn a lot and we change also a lot to the better. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.